Thinking about a career change, but don't know where to start? You're not alone. Whether it's January motivation or midlife restlessness, this is the season when people start asking themselves, is there something more? And here's the problem. Most of us have no idea how to actually navigate a job search, especially if we're changing sectors, dealing with career gaps, or worried that our age might work against us. So today I've brought in an expert. Anna Gardet is a specialist non-profit recruiter at Prospectus, and she's here to pull back the curtain on what recruiters actually look for, how to make career transitions work, and the mistakes that could be costing you interviews. Whether you're in the charity sector and eyeing corporate roles or vice versa, or even if you're just stuck and need a roadmap, this conversation is for you. So hello, Anna, and welcome to the channel. And thank you so much for taking some time to share with us today. Firstly, I wanted to ask you, what is Prospectus and what is your role there?
Thanks very much, Lucy. It's lovely to be here. I really appreciate the invitation. So Prospectus is what we call beyond profit recruitment agency. We don't like the term not-for-profit. We think that the sector does fantastic things, so we refer to beyond profit. And we work at all levels. So it can be a first temp job in the sector through to being the chair or chief executive of a charity. My role there is that I recruit chief executives, their senior teams and board members as part of that wider team within Prospectus. And I've been here for 14 years. So know the sector fairly well and have been working in the sector in a similar role for 17 years. So hopefully I can give some good advice today.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anna, for taking the time. So one of the areas I wanted to cover today is transitions. And many people think that ageism is a factor. And I have a lot of viewers on my channel who are in midlife, just like me, and people worry about the barrier. So could you maybe talk to us a bit about what the reality of the market is right now, what you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to start with the fact that people have fantastic experience. Experience is so great for us as recruiters to see and to be able to demonstrate clearly. And there's also transferable skills, which are really important. And we'll cover that as well in our conversation today, I'm sure. What we're seeing is a marketplace where there are more candidates than there are roles at the moment. And that means when you're selling yourself, you need to be really explicit about what it is you offer and also make sure that you're going for the roles that are realistic for you as well. So it's a combination of being able to be in a strong place to sell yourself and making sure that the roles you apply for are relevant. When you're talking about what it is you offer, there are lots of skills that you may not have thought about. So it might be actually you've got fantastic team management skills. People love to hear about that. It might be budgeting. Everybody wants to know that they're in financially capable hands. It might be operating at a senior level really well, supporting your colleagues. All of these sorts of things are important to be drawing out when you're selling yourself. There's an element of not wanting to apply for roles where you're overqualified for. So, for example, if you're a chief executive and you're applying for a manager role, you might find that actually people then question why you would be going for that role. So making sure that you're going for roles at the right sort of level, unless there's a really clear reason. I've certainly placed people who were overqualified into more junior roles because they've got care responsibilities and actually the organisation really values that. But making sure that you can be really clear that you offer these skills and you're going to do it for the long term. But essentially, a lot of clients are looking for candidates who have done the job before. If you're looking for roles that are at a similar qualification to that you've already been in, that's not a problem.
Thank you very much. And of course, you as a recruiter would be able to advise candidates if you
Absolutely.
think that they're going for roles that they're overqualified for.
Absolutely. And as I say, it's more just about explaining why that might be. If you're happy to share that information, that helps. The biggest question that clients will have is, how long is this person going to stay? Is this just a stopgap job for them? So if you're able to explain away that worry for them, that really helps.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And another thing that I'm really interested in, having done this myself, so I moved from the commercial world into non-profits many, many years ago, and I'm interested in that movement between sectors. So what advice would you give somebody who's maybe worked for, 15 years in the charity sector, in the non-profit sector?
Yeah.
What would you say to them if they were interested in moving maybe into a for-profit commercial role?
Yeah, absolutely. I think somebody in that sector would be getting from you a person who has worked with usually fewer resources in the corporate sector, usually incredibly high demand. They don't have the benefit of being able to adjust prices to increase income. It's all about those relationships and those long-term cultivations, as well as the marketing that you're doing. There are some really obvious transferable skills. So finance, operations, marketing, HR, being able to be really clear with what it is that you've done in those roles, particularly around numbers. Numbers are always really good to talk about the size of budgets that you've managed, the size of teams, the outcomes that you've had in any terms of percentages. That really helps in being able to quickly be able to convey what it is that you offer regardless of sector. There's lots of soft skills that we talk about. So the leadership, the peer working, the strategic skills that I think are really important to be drawing out there. And even functions such as fundraising have transferable skills in terms of the sales side. And actually, if you've been working with corporate partnerships, you have a really good understanding of some of the challenges there anyway in the sector.
Exactly. And what about vice versa? What about people coming from a corporate job and looking at a non-profit role?
So I think what's really important there is to demonstrate your passion, why you're looking to move into the sector. It might be that it's that particular organisation, the cause that they do. And if you're happy to share your lived experience, that can be really powerful for charities to know about. I'll be honest with you, Lucy, I sometimes speak to people who think that it's an easy job and they sort of think they're going to be sitting with their feet up on the desk. We know that's not the case. So I think being really clear that you understand there is a high demand and low resource situation going on in the sector at the moment, which unfortunately isn't going to change anytime soon. Doing your homework and maybe signing up to some of the sector press as well, and being able to demonstrate those transferable skills that we touched in, just the other way around, being able to talk about those skills. Particularly we see in fundraising, there's a shortage of candidates. And so people coming from sales, that's a really good transition, talking about your business development and account management side. We're currently seeing a real shortage in finance and operations people as well. So that's a really helpful transition in terms of skill sets. And then any volunteering or any board roles that you've done really demonstrate that you're already connected into the sector. So that's always a fantastic thing to draw out if you can.
Yeah, fantastic points there. I think often people see what they're lacking rather than seeing all the positives of what they've got. And I think thinking through the experiences that you've got and how they might be transferable, like if you've been in sales, for example, that's exactly like being in a fundraising department, very similar skills. The reason I could move from direct marketing at American Express into marketing in charities was because I had very, very transferable skills back
Absolutely.
then. Now, I want to touch on something that's coming up a lot for people in my channel, which is that many people are lots of people are actually seeking jobs from a position of being unemployed. Many people have had quite difficult times in jobs. They might have had to exit due to burnout or stress. And so I just wondered what advice we could give to people who are sort of having to explain a gap on their CV or having to kind of deal with the lack of confidence that will come from, maybe applying to lots of jobs and, feeling a bit rejected.
Yeah, no, good points there. So the first thing to know is that we're probably in a slightly different world post-COVID. Probably pre-COVID, we had 5-10% of people applying for roles who weren't already in existing roles. And it was much more of a question mark for clients. Why haven't they been working? What's been going on? The world has changed, which is fantastic. And I would always encourage, if there is a career gap there, to explain what it is and to list it on your CV. A little bit like we were talking about earlier, when you create a question mark and a potentially negative question mark in the mind of a client that's recruiting, that's more difficult to explain away than if you've actually explained it. It's absolutely fine to talk about caring. It shows that you've got really, really high values. It might have been a gap for health-related reason. That can happen to anybody. It might be that you've been doing a project like renovating a property. Great, you can pull out those skills. So I would always say reference it. And generally, we're now seeing probably 25 to 30% of people who are not employed applying for roles. That can be a real advantage because you can start more quickly. So if somebody is exiting, there probably wouldn't normally be enough time for a handover, and you can offer that. So you can say that you can start a little bit earlier, you can do some onboarding things as needed, which is always a real bonus. But I think there's also something in that if you have exited an organisation, I would say to people, be really factual where you can in terms of the reasons that you've left. You don't need to bring emotion into it. But if you're factual and actually it was due to redundancy, or it was due to the fact the organisation was closing and you had to scale that organisation down, or your role was quite expensive and you've managed to promote a load of people underneath you who are going to be able to take that on. All of those can be real positives. So just being really clear about those reasons where you can. Don't be afraid of bringing that up. As I say, only needs a line or two on the CV that you can then talk about at interview stage, but making sure that you're comfortable talking about that in a really factual way can help.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So I'm really interested in the kind of pulling back the curtain on recruitment, because when you're a candidate, you feel like you're on the back foot. You're looking for a job and somebody else holds all the cards. So I'm really keen to kind of understand that behind the scenes sort of process, like how you as a recruitment agency sort of work with those clients. So maybe talk us through kind of how does that work? What's it like on that side of the table?
Yeah, no, lovely. Thanks, Lucy. And first of all, just to say, recruiters shouldn't ever be gatekeepers. We should be connecting people. That's what we're about. So hopefully people don't have that experience. But essentially, the first thing that we're doing with the client is where the first conversation that we have with them is really unpacking what it is that they're looking for. So we call it a briefing meeting. And we're making sure that they and us are all aligned on what the organisation is doing, but also where it is currently, what the job is about, and the person that we're looking for. So that's always really important to spend time at the beginning with our clients to really unpack that as we get to know them. We then tend to draw up marketing material, and that's always agreed by them, that really hopefully sells the role and sells the organisation. We'll go out and approach people proactively, as well as contact the people on our database and place adverts to try and find good people. We usually have a role open for about 4 weeks where we're having a lot of engagement with candidates, talking to them, supporting them with their applications. And midway through that, what we tend to do is share a report with our clients, demonstrating the sorts of profiles of people who are interested. The reason is, Lucy, everybody tends to apply now in the last 48 hours. And we don't want to ever say to people, oh, we think it's going to be fine. So we tend to share the kinds of people that we're talking to so that they can almost see those people in real life. Quite often clients will come to us and they have an idea of some superhero who's going to come in and be amazing and have all these different skills. And we have to manage their expectations in that and the market expectations. But it can be really helpful for them to see, oh, this sort of person with this sort of experience is interested in the role. And it also allows us to then feed back to those candidates who are interested to say, actually, they're really looking forward to seeing your application and they'd like you to pull out a little bit here and there. So, once we get to the end of the role and it closes, we're assessing candidates on the person specification, and we use a scoring system there to eliminate bias throughout that. And we're looking at both experience and transferable skills. That's really important for us to be doing both. We then agree with the client who we're interviewing. So again, we're bringing scoring into that process too. And then we come back and present those candidates to the clients with that intel around the interviews that we've had. We then support those clients with the interview, the assessment, and the final selection stages, and negotiate throughout. And it's really important for us that we're supporting our candidates through that process. Everybody should feel that they've had a good experience, because that's what reflects on our clients as well.
Yeah, and that's something I want to draw out now, because one of the things I've heard a lot is where people apply for roles, maybe not through a recruitment consultancy, but where they apply for roles directly to an employer and then they just hear nothing back. And I think that must be the most demotivating and upsetting thing to happen to people. And it's something personally, when I was recruiting, I just never did.
Yeah.
I always made sure people got, that I offered feedback if I'd seen them for interview, and I made sure people kind of knew the outcome. So maybe you can talk to us a bit about that. I mean, why would that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. You're very kind, Lucy. I think it does happen with recruiters. I certainly hear that people haven't had feedback, and I can understand the frustrations. We don't do that. It's really poor practice. For us, our candidates become our clients. So why would we want to do that? That said, you should always expect to have your application acknowledged, and you should always expect to hear an outcome on the application as well. That's just a standard process. Being aware that an application, you might have 400 applications, so we might not be able to offer specific feedback in that case. You can always ask, but just to sort of be aware that if you're not going to interview, it might be a little bit more difficult to get personalised feedback. If you've been to interview, you should always have personalised feedback. You've put a lot of time into that. into that role. You have researched it, you've spent the time of the interview, you've done the application. There's a lot there. So there should always be the case. If I'm totally honest with you, I think that some recruiters worry about giving bad news. Certainly I've been doing some training with junior colleagues recently, and they just worry that they're going to say the wrong thing. And so I think people avoid it. Actually, for us, as long as we can be really factual, as long as we can listen to the people and understand their experience as well, I tend to always start my conversations if someone's been at an interview and it's not going to be good news with, how did you feel it had gone? Because the majority of people say, do you know what? I just think I froze. And then we can talk about how they can prepare for an interview another time to avoid that as well. So it shouldn't be something that people are worried about. But bearing that in mind, if you haven't heard back after an interview, I would email the recruiter or the recruiting team at the organisation and just say, I'd be really pleased to hear about positive and negative feedback. It would be really helpful for me, because if they are a little bit worried, they might actually prefer to put that on an email because they've got the time to be able to work that through. So those would be my tips, really.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you mentioned that you might get 400 applications to a role. So I'd like to talk a bit about automation and AI. So we've got all these tools now where we can speed things up and make life easier. And I'd just like your reflections on if and how you're using AI in your processes.
So first of all, probably really important to start with the fact that we are not using them to screen CVs. We don't believe that that's ethical. The algorithms and the biases within AI, we don't feel would be set up to do that. That's a human skill set that we feel is really important. And we talk about transferable skills. We think it's really important to be able to identify that in the CVs as well. So we're not using it for that. If I'm honest, we're still working out our AI policy, as a lot of organisations are. What we're tending to use it for in particular is if I've had an hour-long interview with someone, I will tend to verbalise my notes into an AI system. I'm always really careful that's always anonymous, so there's no identification going on there. That just helps me to write up my notes. And obviously I'm going back through and making sure that that's all correct. But that's what I would share with the client to be able to just summarise the conversation. We tend to, it is important, I think, to differentiate between AI and CRM systems. We tend to use the CRM system and we will search for candidates on our database using what we call a Boolean search, which allows us to identify skill sets within it. So I think there's something about making sure that you have a well-presented CV is important, that draws out skills within that, and making sure that it's easy to read. Sometimes people will put in sort of different formatting, and I would say if you can keep it quite a clear formatting, that helps some of those different CRM systems to be able to identify you.
One of the things I've really struggled with actually as I've got older and I've got more things on my CV, it ends up being more and more pages. What would you think would be a recommendation for a length of CV?
Yeah.
Sometimes people ask for 2 pages, which it can be quite tough, but would you say that's a good idea?
Yeah, we tend to actually say 1,000 words just because people can shrink their fonts down to 8, and then it makes it even more difficult to read. So I would say if you've got a lot of experience and you want to demonstrate that, I personally would rather see more than less. So 1,000 words is a guide, but if you think you're going on to 3 pages because it's really relevant, I would say the 3 pages. You might want to drop a line to the recruiter and say, look, I really want to demonstrate my full experience for you. Is 3 pages okay? Once we go over 4, I slightly worry that people aren't able to be succinct in their communication. So I think trying to keep it to 3 if you can is always good. Ideally the 1,000, but as I say, when you've got great experience, you do want to be able to convey that. So personally, I always think a little bit more is not a problem.
Great tips. Thank you so much. So one of the areas that recruiters or employers often ask about is salary expectations. And there's a lot of conversation in the world of kind of recruitment about kind of almost the ethics of doing that, because clearly often women may well be paid less than men, or they may under ask. What's your advice on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason we tend to ask it when people are registering with us is because we don't want to send them roles that are not relevant for them. So we tend to put in there the desirable salary, I think is the way that we phrase it. But at interview, we always ask what salary people are looking for, because exactly as you've touched on, Lucy, we want to reduce that gender and ethnicity pay gap. If we say what salary you're on, and then we share that with the client, that's not really reflecting what somebody true value is from our point of view. I will share that there is a gender element in this. Men tend to ask for higher salaries. So I think if you're ever in doubt about what salary you want to be sharing with a recruiter, have a look at some of the jobs that you think are comparable for what you want to look for, and look at what those salaries are, because essentially you're being paid for what those roles are worth. So if actually you're seeing roles at around 70,000 and you were on 55,000, but you think, yeah, I can do those, then I would be saying I would be increasing what you're looking for in terms of your salary, because you may well have been being underpaid.
Great, thank you so much. So I want to move us on now to kind of really setting people up for success. What, if you got a CV sort of in your inbox, what about it would make you immediately want to pick up the phone to that candidate?
That's a really good question. And it's a bit of a myth that there is a perfect CV. There is a perfect CV for each job. And it might be that we're recruiting a finance and ops director one day, and then we're recruiting somebody who's a program director or even a chair the next day. So all CVs will look different. So please don't think that there is one way forward and that's it. But essentially clarity. So I'm looking for CVs where I can really easily understand what someone's responsibilities were and what their achievements were. So I often say to people, break that down onto your roles. Say my responsibilities, my achievements, and put a couple of bullet points there. Ideally, you put figures in there as well. Numbers are fantastic to be able to convey information. It might be the growth percentage. It might be the number of staff that you've managed. It might be the size of budgets. Again, that just helps us to really understand and take into account what a person has covered in the breadth of experience they bring, but quite quickly. So those are the tips that I would give essentially around communicating that information. There are skill sets. You can outline your skill sets at the start of your CV, but I would really encourage people to draw out the achievements under the roles that they've been doing. That helps enormously.
Brilliant tips. Thank you. So just moving on to somebody, like picturing somebody who's been raising a family, maybe someone who's been out of work with caring responsibilities, and wants to kind of dip their toe back into the recruitment market and start looking for roles. What's the one piece of advice you'd give them?
I've got lots, Lucy.
Okay,
I'll try and keep it succinct.
As many as you like.
I know. The key one is take your time. I often say to people, you'll probably be in the supermarket on a Saturday afternoon, walking up an aisle and think, hang on a second, why haven't I put that on my CV? We're very good at looking forward. What's next? We're not very good at looking backwards. And also, when you work collaboratively as a leader, you're not very good at identifying what it is that you led on. So take your time to think all of those things through. I would keep a notebook so that if you are in the middle of the supermarket, you can just scribble something down. That's a bit old-fashioned, probably looking at apps to do that now instead. But making sure that you're also thinking about what you've enjoyed, what you think you're good at, and what you're proud of. I think all those are really important, because that starts to build a narrative of who I am and who I'm presenting. The other thing I tend to say to people is job searching is a bit like a funnel. So I would stick a load of different ideas in at the start, and you'll get to narrow down, actually, I don't think I do want to do that role, or actually, I don't want to be in that sector, or actually, I think I am worth this salary. So the funnel becomes a bit narrow. You don't want it to be so narrow that you're only applying for one job a year, but you want to make sure that actually you've had that opportunity to look at a variety of different roles, because that can help your thinking. And again, that can take a little bit of time. Women are more likely to read a person's specification in a role, and they're more likely to say, oh, I've got a few of those. Men are more likely to say, yeah, I've got all of those. So I think there's something about a confidence issue and being able to say, if I think I've got over 50% of what they're looking for in this person's specification, I should go for it, or I should at least reach out and share my CV and see if people are interested. There's also transferable skills. So we've talked, haven't we, about caring is not an easy job. It's a job in itself. Being able to talk about that if you're happy to, being able to talk about, raising children in your CV is not what it used to be. People appreciate that is not easy. Being able to talk about a big project that you've led on is also really, really relevant. And the other thing to bear in mind is that this sector is a kinder sector, I think, than some others can experience. People understand that there are gaps. That's absolutely fine. I've genuinely never come across an organisation who said, oh, someone's had a gap on their CV to raise children. I think that's a red flag for me. So try not to beat yourself up too much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being so generous with your time and all your expertise today. I think what's really landed for me today is gap between kind of what we can do and how we express it, and being a bit more confident about translating all of our experience. So if you've been watching this today and you're feeling stuck or scared about making a move, I hope this conversation has given you permission to take that first step. And both Anna and I'm sure, wish you all the very best with your job search and a fruitful 2026. Thank you for watching.